On Kashyyyk, a particular clone engineer was stationed with the nickname Rox. He was praised for his brilliance, but infamous for his orthodox methods of fixing and reprogramming fallen separatist droids after battles had been won. He gave each of them names and modified them to all look different. The good thing about them being droids was that as long as the head was still intact, most parts could be replaced when damaged during battle. But many clones thought it was weird and shunned Rox. Because of that, Rox led a lonely life, often not being drafted for battle, as clones did not want to stand beside him or hear his argument for the so manyth time to use his droids in combat. But recently, intel acquired by the rebels turned into a mission for him. Words of Thrawn's counterplan had reached the clones and rebels, but specifics were missing. A very small and not heavily defended mobile Imperial security checkpoint was located, and they figured Rox and his droids would be enough to seize the intel on Thrawn's plan. The checkpoint was on the top of a hill in the forest. Rox booted up all the droids that were combat ready, and embarked on the mission to attack the checkpoint. It did not take long before their presence was noted, and a brief firefight occurred on the road towards the Imperial point. The Imperial troops were a bit surprised themselves, as they saw the droids associated with the Separatists open fire on them. A few droids were lost during the fighting up the slope, but the small alcove as an entrance provided an easy target for the others to concentrate on. The present officers and engineers also took up firearms, but they lacked the combat skill to prove any real resistance. Some even fled further up the hill, but they had no other way to go, and thus were easily sniped from the lower position. With the crew out of the way, Rox started to retrieve the file requested by his superiors. The designated file mentioned that Thrawn was in the process of moving heavy artillery and walkers to a single location further inland for a massive-scale counterattack. A few hours later, the second assault on the Imperial prison was about to commence. After the first failed attempt, the Imperials had expanded their defenses to the beach with turrets, barricades, armor, and plenty of infantry. This time, the forces needed in order to attack the prison would need to be much larger, but Plo Koon thought such a large force was a waste if it was only used to free the captives. He ordered Doom to raise his legions and capture the prison for Republic use. Just like the battle before, several rebels would accompany the assault, as the addition of more armor and walkers. But in reality, this frontal assault was a diversion for Jyn Erso and her squad. A nearby cave looks partially out over the side of the prison, and if they used the cave to enter the prison unnoticed, they could free Chewbacca and the others while the Imperial eyes were focused on the beachhead. The Imperial sensors had picked up the attackers' approach. As expected, all personnel were heading to the prison's frontal defenses, giving Jyn and the rebels a chance to scale down the cliff, gaining entry to the prison. At the beach, the clones and rebels came into sight as the towers started firing. The infantry waded through the water to get to the shore quickly, but the Imperial troopers awaited them with ferocious blaster and turret fire. The more agile walkers headed in to support as well, while the enemy armor stood its ground on the sandy beach. With the battle being fought in the background, Jyn found an opportunity to move mostly unseen. Sounds of alarms and distant explosions muffled their footsteps as they headed into the courtyard. The team split up as Jyn and the main assault force prepared to destroy the doors leading further into the prison. The other teams were preparing for the detonation of the main power, thereby forcing the front gate to open. Back at the beach, an absolute slaughter was happening. both sides gave it everything they had. As the walkers came closer, their attacks on the infantry became more devastating. The front line was weakened, but more armor arrived to reinforce the troops. Explosions echoed through the prison's courtyard as the rebels brought the Imperial power down. The main gate opened, ridding itself as a barrier for the invader. The entrance to the inner halls gave way too, as the rebels started to appear through the thick smoke, completely surprising the few stormtroopers who were still inside the facility. Time was of the essence now, as their presence was no longer unnoticed. On the beach, the Imperial second line started to fall as well. Clone and Rebel units still had trouble reaching the shore, but Rebel tanks and walkers were in range to do some serious damage to the Imperial armor. Beyond this, a line of death troopers stood between the clones and the prison, their accurate blast fire being deadly for infantry, but mostly harmless to the tanks. The beach had mostly been cleared, covered in smoke, fire, and broken parts of metal. The time was there to seize it, but the towers still offered resistance. Jin's unit worked its way deeper into the prison. Casualties were low, as well as resistance, as grenades and blasters rid the hallways of Imperial life. Smoldering corpses covered the sand as the first of the clones had reached the shore and dove for cover. The very first ones fell to the death troopers' fire, but as more and more arrived, they were able to take them out one by one. The clones had claimed the beach and could march straight ahead into the enemy prison. Jin had cleared most of the hallways with her soldiers and had pinpointed Chewbacca's whereabouts. Part of the team went to look for the other prisoners, while Jin and her best units moved to free the Wookiee. In front of the chamber where he was being held stood 3 elite units, but Jin figured some tougher resistance could be present, and so she ordered a full-on relentless attack to break through with grenades. Though 4 men were lost, they managed to get through. It only took the rebel engineer a few moments to clear the shield door and free the captives. Jin ordered all troops to leave the facility at once if they had found the other prisoners, in fear of reinforcements. But once outside, they were welcomed by the victorious clones and rebels who stood upon the doorstep of the prison. At this time, everyone in Theed was holding their breath. With access to the planet being cut off, leadership was left in the hands of Narkoba, a low-ranking counselor with very little training. Though what he lacks in training, he did not lack in spirit, and was prepared to face the enemy head-on. If it was a fight they wanted, it was a fight he would give them.